Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Insider's View. We're here today with Scott MacIntosh, from Head of Analytics of SAP. He's also a board member of ours at the Masters of Management and Analytics at McGill University. So this is a great treat for everyone. So Scott, you want to just give a quick introduction other than that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Peter.
Of course.
As a former McGill alumni, always a pleasure to come back and speak to some of our students that are coming out. Pleasure to be here. As Peter was saying, currently look after the sports industry for SAP for North America. Previous to that, spent about 15 years working on the team side of sports. Anywhere from some time at Maple Leaf Sports in Toronto with the Raptors, the Leafs, moved over to Ottawa with the Senators, spent some time in minor league baseball down in the US, and then eventually went to a sports tech startup and found myself now at SAP. So it's been a bit of a ride, but I think we'll get into some of the details on the journey, but really happy to share some of my experiences with you guys.
Awesome. So, we already prepped you with the questions, so you probably had some time, but let's go over it again. So if I were to take away, your salary, the savings, all your connections, and said, Scott, you're back to being 25 years old. How are you getting a job in today's market? I think everyone's would love to see how you, frame that way in your thought process to get, fix such an unprecedented problem.
Great question, Peter. I think if I look back to a few years ago when I was 25, in my industry, and I think a lot of the industries that people are going into these days, sending a resume in and hoping to get a call back, it's really tough. I know I've done a lot of hiring in my days, and typically I would get HR handing me 100 resumes. They would go through some and pick out what they thought might be a great fit for the job I was hiring for. And not to take away from HR or that whole process, but I think if you really want something, like anything else that you do in life, it's about going after it in a way that puts you out above everybody else that's following the exact same process. So for me, first thing I would do is identify the places you want to work. Obviously, you can go through the traditional channels, like it's going to be a quick process, right? You got a resume, you submit it. What I always try to do is reach out to the person who has the job that you want. Maybe not the job you're applying for, but maybe it's a job, a year or two down the line. And figure out as much as you can about that actual company. So for me, if I look back at the first job I was trying to get, I wanted to get into sports. And I remember I wanted to work for the Ottawa Senators. I wanted to work for the Montreal Expos. I went out and I applied for both those companies. Didn't get a call back. Didn't get a next step. So what did I do? I started making phone calls. I literally called up the person I thought that was going to be able to get me that job. And out of the blue, I got a call back. I mean, I literally told them, left them a message, left them my thoughts about why it was going to be a perfect fit for me and my background, and let them know of my ambition and why I really wanted it.
So that's interesting, but how can we then change this? So phone calls, you left them your ambition is an interesting way. How would you do that maybe online in today? So we're not going to call, we're not going to have the phone numbers anymore. So you were going to say you're probably going to use a LinkedIn or a social media situation.
Yeah, I mean, don't just let your resume do everything for you.
Right.
Reach out on LinkedIn. Let them know that you had applied for a position. Let them know your qualifications and why you're a good candidate for the job. But for me, what always lets people stand out a bit is, obviously, if you're passionate about a job, there's some things that you've done in the past to get yourself ready for it. And I know for me, I was trying to get in the sports industry. So I went out, and even before you start applying, get out there and actually put yourself out there a bit. I would volunteer at sporting events. I would have a story to tell them, however I was leaving a message for them, or if I was sending them a LinkedIn invite. a story about how I had prepared myself outside of just going to school and just doing the things that everybody else was doing, and really set myself apart. So if you've got something, you can send them. If you know the position and what it's going to be like, let's say you're going to be an analyst for a marketing company, look at their products, do a quick little synopsis of the marketplace and how you might tweak some of the campaigns that they're currently doing. Show them that you put some time and thought into it.
Yep.
Not just a resume that says, "Oh, I'm a market analyst. I can crunch some numbers." Really put together a bit of a case in terms of not so much why you can do the job, but why you're the right person for them to hire.
Yeah, and I think that changes the aspect a lot, and that's something that's interesting. And I was actually telling some students to do this when they do an interview. Like I think we did that with IFTY. Is when you get the interview, hear the pain points kind of that they're talking about, and then deliver a presentation or something. If they're not following back or something, do that. That's interesting. You were saying that because if you just do it right up front with like a CV plus like a presentation, like let's say a PDF version of a PowerPoint, it is going to set you quite a difference. So it is an interesting thought. So I love it. So if you can just continue, I'm just talking out loud. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting thing to do it pre then post.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you can probably replicate, right?
Right.
Obviously, you want to put some originality into it. You want it to pertain to that specific company that you're applying for.
Right.
But at the same time, it's hard for us as a hirer to understand who is in front of us without you actually making it personal, right? Like just a list of the things that you've done doesn't really give me an idea into the person that you are. And if it's a company that you really want to work for, you want what stands out to be what you're all about as a human being. So, here's the reason why I am trying to get this job. Maybe it's something to do with your family. Maybe it's something to do with your upbringing. For me, I would have said, I'm a kid from a small town, grew up on a dairy farm. Literally, my ambition was to leave that small town, come to the big city, work for a sports franchise. I'm passionate about what it is you do as a company. Like, get into the heart of what makes you different and what drives you. Right. Because what really makes somebody hire you is not a list of checks or check boxes that they can run across off. What sets you apart, right? And that comes from you actually diving into who it is you really are and why it is you're going to do a little bit extra than anybody else who's applying for that position.
Right. Which I think just goes back to we hire people for trust, right? That's what we hire. It's about trust. Can I trust you? Even if we look at degrees or checklists, the reason why they look at degrees and checklists is to put trust, right? It's a way to de-risk. So if you can then do an emotional de-risking as well, I think that's an interesting thing. So I love that takeaway that you just gave. But what else would we do? So we do that. We reach out to people. We gave them like a presentation. What other tactical things is in Scott's mind? I would love to know.
Well, I think one thing you'll find is that most companies are not just advertising, through your traditional channels, but if you can find the people that you're going to be working alongside and reach out to them, typically the hiring manager is asking them anyways if they've got a friend that might be a good fit for the position, right? Because it's always good to bring people in that already have a connection to that, job or that company or the group that they're going to be working in. So, it's pretty easy. If you've got a marketing manager position that's being opened up, look at the marketing coordinators, look at maybe some of the salespeople that work at that company, and reach out to them. You'd be surprised. Nothing bad is going to happen by sending a LinkedIn message to somebody who works at a company that you really want to get into. But the good that can come from it is sitting down, having a coffee, really showing who you are in a setting that isn't an interview. If I look back, I can remember when I was at MLSE, I was hiring for about 10 people in sales, and I got probably 100 resumes from HR. And the 10 people that I hired were all people that had reached out to me at LinkedIn or we're a reference from somebody who was already inside of our company.
Yeah.
So don't be shy about that stuff. I'm not going to come up with some sports analogy, but I mean, Wayne Gretzky said it: you miss 100% of the shots that you
There
don't
you
take.
go. Or Michael Scott, depends who you think about, right?
Exactly.
But okay, so we do that. So you create your brand. What do you think about creating your brand, even those presentations, not for the company, but even just promoting yourself online as well? Like,
Oh, yeah. Also, a really great way to do it. If you know there's a specific industry that you want to get into, once again, if you go through LinkedIn,
yep.
lots of sports groups, right? And I'm going to bring this back to sports, so my industry. But if you're looking to get into, whatever industry that might be, smart cities, a certain technology, look at the LinkedIn groups, join them, and maybe once again, there's your chance. Maybe you're not sending, a research project that you did directly to your hiring manager, but you're sending it into a group with a lot of like-minded people that might have positions within their company.
Right.
So you're doing a really great job of building out your brand. Maybe you want to run a webinar and push it out through a lot of your friends that are already in industry and get them to share it, where you're talking for 15, 20, 30 minutes on something that you've done. Once again, maybe you're just exposing that project that you've spent a bunch of time on in school, and pushing that out and showcasing your skills in a way that's a little bit more branded.
Right. No, I love it. So we got that. So let's go over the list again. So we said, make sure we reach out, right? Try to make sure you do a presentation as well to show that you're authentic. Is there anything else that, would be, Scott? Okay. So like, all right, let's go through the list. You reached out, you showed that you're authentic, you're giving the presentation. What else is Scott looking for now to make sure that he checks his own boxes?
Well, I mean, if you're going through the process now where you've gotten an opportunity to get in front of them, it's being respectful and thankful. And I think, you read it in a lot of different books, but the person who's setting up the interview for you, the person who maybe you sat down for a coffee with, you need to be very thankful and respectful of every person that you come across as you go through that process of getting known by a company. Because often the final decision is made in not the way you would imagine.
Awesome. Please shed light. I know what you mean, but please shed light on that. Please, please.
Yeah. So you go through the process of interviewing 20 people, and you get down to your short list of 5.
Awesome.
And typically, you're sitting there and you're looking at these resumes, and you're thinking back to each of those situations where you're bringing them in to interview. And typically, you'll bring in somebody else who was involved in the process, but you also might just go out and talk to, maybe it's the receptionist, maybe it's some people who interacted with everybody that came in. And I know we had an unbelievable girl who ran our department, essentially, like most executive assistants do. And we would go to her and say, listen, you kind of were around them as they were waiting to go in for the interviews. We really like this and this and this about them. And you'll confirm a lot of the things, but you'll also ask them for their impression, right? Because when you're bringing somebody in, you just want to make sure that they fit in regardless of the situation they find themselves in. And when they're coming in and interviewing with you or with me, in this case, they're giving me a lot of cases a scripted version of who they are.
Right.
But she would have had an opportunity, or he would have had an opportunity to see something very different. Right. So just make sure all the way along that you're respectful and thankful to each individual, because in some cases, if it's a toss-up, that's how the decision's made. And you need to make sure you stand up.
You just probably let in one of the biggest secrets, I think, in business. The most important person at a company, everyone looking, I'm going to look at you in the camera right now. Everyone in the company is the executive assistant. They control everything. They control Scott's schedule. So if you want to get in for 5 minutes, they control Scott's schedule.
Yeah.
And no one reaches out to them. So like that would actually be, speaking of Scott, actually should be like a tactical situation. Reaching out to an executive assistant would probably be very, very good tactics actually, and way different. So I just thought of it right now, but.
Yeah, no, 100%. That would be phenomenal, because you're assuming a lot when you go and contact a company to try to understand who you might be interviewing with.
Right.
And I think everybody along the line likes to show that they're appreciated, right?
Right.
So like you're saying, Peter, nobody knows more inside the company about who's making the decision,
Yeah.
but also sometimes will reflect the respect that you've shown them back to the people that you want to get in front of.
Exactly. So I think that's a great thing. So for everyone taking notes at home, that would be all of a sudden we're just going to see skyrocketing of executive assistants writing back to us. Scott and Peter, I'm so busy on LinkedIn now. It's all because of your fault.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so anyway, so I think that's great. Is there anything that you would probably want to give out, even just even some more advice, more like, we gave the tactics. I think that's good. But is there anything that, maybe you're getting questions for? I know you do some coaching sometimes as well for some students. Do you see a constant, stream of questions or?
I do. And I think one of the things, if I remember back to being a student and coming out, you're confident for sure, but when it comes time to find that first job, sometimes there's a part of you that loses touch with who you really are, right? And the skills that you're bringing forward. As somebody who's hiring, I'm always shocked by how little confidence students have to do the things they need to do to get that first job. And it goes back to, don't hide things inside you that you should be proud of and you should be exposing to the people you're trying to get a job with. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of students just fail to do. You know what? It's not offside to reach out to the president of a company if you think that having a conversation with them is going to help them in the end by hiring a person that's going to move their company forward. Right? I'm not saying go out and
Hi Bill Gates, we're coming.
Yeah, exactly. Like pick your spots, but don't worry about going too high up to have that first conversation, because everybody who's been out in the workforce for a while remembers what it's like to be a student, and they appreciate the fact that you don't have every single thing figured out. And that you're going to give them an honest assessment of who you are, and really bring out that passion as to why they want to work for you. I'll never say no to a conversation if somebody has something impactful and honest that they want to give back to me as a conversation or as a meeting.
Of course. What else? I'm trying to think of some skills. Do you think of, like, is there any skills that you're seeing right now, especially in sports, especially in tech? A lot of people are talking about tech companies needing specific skills. Do you want to give a list of some things in your mind right now that you see that are in demand? Or
yeah, I mean, I would say one of the things for me is as I was going into industry, I thought that this was the job that I wanted, right? And then I went in and got my first job, and I realized I was missing a lot of skills. You really always have to look ahead, 2 or 3 steps, right? Look to the job that you want in 2 or 3 years. And when you're thinking about that first job, sometimes just the school skills that you have, obviously, McGill does an amazing job of preparing you to get out into the workforce, but you might be lacking a few things, right? And sometimes it's about understanding, like, what? Every job I seem to be applying for wants me to have some sales skills. So maybe, if it's not working out for me getting that end job right away that I wanted to get into, maybe I'll take a chance and go back and take a role somewhere else that builds on the skill set that I know I'm going to need to be successful 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road.
Awesome.
So don't think that the job you're taking has to be perfect. Just make sure it's a job that gets you closer to where you want to go.
And I think that's like great advice, and especially in today's world, because a lot of people wanted X job and X job is no longer there. So going to, like, X minus Y job to try to get X plus Z job in the future, I think is a great opportunity. I think so. I'm happy I asked that question. I didn't think you were going to go there, but I'm like, awesome. This is a great time. But I think that's actually really good. Like, especially, I was doing the research, and right now in Montreal, the associate level is actually dropping under the monthly moving average. So
Mm.
it's actually scary for the university students who are about to graduate.
Yep.
So we may have to start telling them, hey, you may want to drop down a level just to get rolling and then come back up, when everything is going. So I'm happy you brought that up. So I was going to say, we're pretty good on time, but I wanted to just say, can you do a final checklist of, what is the takeaways, like 3 takeaways, as Miguel always teaches us?
This is how every interview is supposed to end, right? Like,
there they go.
Sum it up in 3. So I would say, first off, you need to go in a different direction than everybody else is going. Don't let HR and the typical apply for the job process to be the only way that you get your name in there. So, reach out to people who already work there. Go directly to the hiring manager. Get yourself standing out a little bit. Secondly, make sure that you have something to showcase to them. If you really want a job doing something very specific, if it's a very specific role, then you should be showing the hiring manager that you've done something to prove that before you walk into that office to sit down with them. So bring a case study that you've done, do something outside of the norm to have yourself stand out as you go into that job interview or as you're trying to get noticed. And lastly, be confident. You're coming out of an unbelievable school with a tremendous reputation. When I tell people I had the opportunity to go to McGill, I never get anything but, respect that maybe I do or maybe I don't deserve. It definitely helps take me up another level based on, what I'm bringing with me. So have that confidence to go out there and talk to the people that you want to get the job that you want. You're going to be successful for that person, and bring that confidence when you're having that first discussion with them.
Awesome.
That's it.
That's a good 3. So thank you, Scott, for your time. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into this week's episode. We hope to see you again. And next time, we're going to have some awesome guests as well. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks.
Good luck, everybody.